Hello and welcome to the latest episode of What's Going On, a new podcast series in which myself, Michael Curzon, and SD Wickett discuss the topics that don't quite make it to press. Now, the headlines earlier this week were dominated by the positive news that indoor hospitality reopened, but for many pubs across the country, it was too late. A report from this morning, Thursday morning, found that 6 pubs closed every single week during lockdowns during the past year. Almost one every day, other than, I suppose, the day of rest. Now, Sam, we were talking before we started recording about the fact that it's easy during the COVID era, where we showed this graph of rising and trends and numbers, just to focus on, as I say, the numbers of pubs closed, which is itself, pretty shocking, although not surprising and very sad. But there's a more personal human aspect to this, which you've written on in an article published tonight on the death of the British pub. So what is it behind the numbers that matters about this news?
Well, you start off with a good point there. You mentioned how all the the predictive modeling and graphs have driven a lot of this stuff. It just shows the moral fallacy of modern technocracy, where this sort of thing takes precedent over subjective human experience. The pub is it's a symbol of so many things, and one of them being freedom. You think ahead to your 18th birthday, so you can go to the pub and you have that freedom, right? It's such an intrinsic part of British public life, and poets and writers and philosophers of the English tradition have for centuries written about how this is the center of community life in the UK, and it's being stripped away. It's same as anything. It's like there's just a random tangent, but there's a reason that we don't interfere with nature and say Africa to save the cheetah. It's because if you interfere with something too much, you kill it. A good thing has to be organic, and if you micromanage it, if you even set into law that it has to open on your permission, something in it dies. And with every new little hurdle to jump through just to go and get a drink with your friend, a little part of that experience of that, it's almost an entity of its own, but a little part of that dies. And I had my first indoor dining experience yesterday, and I was looking forward to it, but within I mean, I enjoyed the company I was with, but within 5 minutes, it just the joy of the evening had sort of been sucked out of me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you talk about the company that you were with, and I'm pleased to hear that you enjoyed that. But it seems to me, as you said, the home is the center of the family, isn't it? It's the founding point of the family, and the pub is, among others, although possibly the primary center of community. And one of the great aspects of pubs when you go is that you're not only going with one specific friend or family member, but that given that it's a center of community, you also should know, if it's one of your locals, for example, everybody else in the room. You'd certainly know the people working behind the bar, and you'd know the odd chap sat in the corner and the couple sat in the other corner, and the person being a bit loud in the middle, getting up and talking to old friends, new friends. But that is, it seems to me, one of the greatest aspects, which has been lost in the form that pubs have now taken under government guidance, where you have to mask up when you walk in and go straight to your seat. And once you've done that, that's pretty much it. You're nailed down, only allowed to stand up again to go to the toilet or to go home. The few times that I've been back, I must say my local actually has been quite relaxed. That and it's been run, given the circumstances, as well as any pub could, I think. But even then, when you walk past people that you walk past long old friends or friends of your parents, whatever, who are on the corner, it almost feels awkward when you walk past, because you're not allowed to go up and shake hands and sit with them for a minute, then move over with somebody else. You've got to give an awkward wave, sit down and spend the rest of the evening pretending they're not there.
Yeah. I mean, there's no excitement to it, There's no and as I pointed out in the article, the the most wonderful thing about the pub, among many other things, is that it's spontaneous. You can just, prior to this, horror show. You could just call up a friend and say, "Do you fancy a drink?" And that'd be it. You go out and you just see where the night took you, because it was just somewhere you could go and you could see other people, and you could either make plans of your own or join other plans, and it just puts you into like a, almost like a waiting room, and you can go down any route possible. And now it's, you go there, you have your drink, you come home.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one aspect of pubs which is quite exciting, and used to be able to do it quite well in Burton, where I'm from, having been the brewing capital of the world, is the pub crawl. You do that, this place offers this sort of beer, this place offers that sort. You can get this sort of snack at this one, that sort there, and all the different people you meet along the way. So that was really exciting. But now, because of limited seating capacity within pubs, which has been slightly eased because of the reopening of indoors, but it still very much exists. Everything is sort of by appointment. So if you want to arrange pub crawl, you don't just say to your friend, well, we'll probably stay here for 2 and then move on to the next at 6 and then the next at 7, whatever. You have to call them all in advance, make bookings. At some places you might have to put deposits on, especially if you're in a city centre. By the end of it, you can't be bothered to go once you've done all the bookings. It's sort of, as you say, it takes all the spontaneity out of it. It takes all the joy.
Nothing ruins a night out more than meticulously planning every moment of it. Like,
well, it's like on films where a family goes on holiday and the children are really excited and everything's been packed and it's all great, and then the boring dad comes in and says, right, here's the itinerary, and at 3 p.m. we're doing this, at 5 minutes past we're doing this, and everyone goes, oh, can't we just go around and have a look? Which is part of the point with pubs as well.
So when we spoke about talking about the pubs, we didn't want to fall into the trap of the government line, which is numbers obsessed, graphs and data, and it, as I said before, it is just it's a question that can only be really viewed subjectively and sentimentally. And as I pointed out, the death of the pub isn't in the amount of pubs there are, although that's a number of massive concern. I think it's in the 380s now have closed in this, but again, it is the atmosphere in a pub. It is it's a melting pot environment. People go in there and people mix, and different things happen.
Yeah. Well, as you wrote in the piece, yes, 6 pubs have closed every week, but every single pub has changed. And I suppose the question then is, if lockdown does further ease on June 21st, or later than that because of some bogus fears over the Indian COVID variant, whenever it is, we'd hope that things can turn more to normality rather than this new normal world, which the World Economic Forum tries to tell us about. But I don't know. I think a lot of people have become accustomed to the arrow following in the shops, to the lack of handshakes. So it will be interesting to see to what extent we can scale this back.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people have just made a Faustian pact with Westminster, where they trade off their autonomy for superficial protection. Which, I mean, given that there's still a somewhat a high death count, I mean, that protection hasn't even worked. It's really frustrating. I think a lot of people just are either conditioned or just so terrified that this for them is a willing sacrifice. But I don't live in that fear. Neither do you. Neither does anyone that I really know. So like the fact that that's being inflicted upon all of us, like not only are you not allowed to do anything, but you have to be scared. You have to be terrified. You have to be on defense all the time. It's literally. And I was saying this before we got into the call, but it's like it's state mandated misery we're living under at the moment.
Well, that's an important point there, because it's, I understand that some people, I don't understand the reason behind it. What fear?
If you're old, right?
Well, not if you're fully vaccinated, though, which most old people are. But regardless, I understand if some people would rather distance, would rather bump elbows rather than shake hands and all this, and limit tables to 6. But if myself, my partner, my friends, and my family would like to ignore all that, would like to have more than 6 people at a table, would like to stand up, shake hands, and move around the pub and speak to others, then that should be allowed. I don't see now why the government should have any right to say, actually, regardless of what you feel comfortable doing, this is what you can do, and this is all you'll be allowed to do. And if you don't just do this, you'll be fined for it. And also the pub in which you do these things will get fined. Some people claim there was a reasonable excuse for the government to say this last year when the virus first came. I still think that's wrong, but especially at this point where we've seen reported earlier today that in the month of April, nearly 90% of the more than 7,000 neighbourhoods in England and Wales saw 0 deaths in a whole month. And yet the government still tells us whether or not we can or can't hug or can mix in more than numbers of 6. Absolute nonsense.
Yeah, but it's something that every self-respecting citizen of this country should just completely disregard and go about their lives as normally as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's our message, and that's what's going on.